I'm Hemant Mehta.
And I'm Jessica Bluemke.
And you're listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com. You can now listen to all of our episodes and see show notes at FriendlyAtheistPodcast.com.
All right, so I am here today at the American Atheist Convention 2015 in Memphis with Susan Blackmore. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
All right, so you're a author, a psychologist. What's your background?
Oh, my background is originally I did psychology and physiology at Oxford, and then I had a most extraordinary out-of-the-body experience while I was there. In my first term, in fact, in which I seemed to be out of my body, floating around, traveling around the planet. You know, it was the most meaningful experience that I'd ever had, and everything was incredibly vivid. And I'm only telling you this because, in a way, it's been the beginning of the whole story of everything that followed, because it made me just so curious as to what was going on. And being of a scientific nature, I wanted to find out. But I jumped to the conclusions at the time, understandably, given the science then, that my soul had left my body and I was on the astral planes and life, there would be life after death. I jumped to all these conclusions, and I became absolutely determined that I was going to become a parapsychologist, and I was going to prove to the closed-minded materialist scientists that were teaching me at Oxford that, there's all these there's more in heaven and earth than you ever dreamt of in your philosophy and all that stuff. You can imagine me, can't you? Really? Sure. I'm going to prove it to them. Well, what did I do? I went and did a PhD in parapsychology, which I was one of the first people to do that in Britain. And I did lots of experiments, and I didn't find any paranormal phenomena at all. So then I joined PsyCop, it's become the Center for Inquiry now, but the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, and I became a skeptic. I became what I would call rent-a-skeptic. I just, like the BBC, which is fantastic, they have this policy of being fair to things. So I would go on these TV programs where there's 99 people who've seen a ghost and Sue Blackmore to tell them about brain processing and the temporal lobes and blah, blah, blah. Or there's 150 people who've been abducted. No, there wouldn't be that many. Let's say 30 people who've been abducted by aliens, and Sue Blackmore to come along and say it's really sleep paralysis. Or there would be 1,000 people in a big TV studio who all know that they're, telepathic, and Sue Blackmore to come along and say, well, I've done these experiments, and they go, blah, blah, So I did that for a long time, and I got really, really sick of it. I think one of the interesting things I discovered was that when I was a believer in all this stuff, the skeptics gave me no trouble. When I became skeptical, I got hate mail, really horrible, horrible things from psychics and people who knew in the truth, and they knew they could predict the future and what terrible things would happen to me and all of that kind of thing. But after quite a long time, we're talking many years, decades, I thought I still don't understand that original experience. So after a long time, many, many years, even decades, I thought, well, I still don't understand that original experience. And what is it that's so important about it? It's about what's real? What is experience anyway? What is the nature of consciousness? So I went back to those fundamental questions. So since then, I've done a lot of work on consciousness. I've written lots of books about consciousness, usually trying to increase the perplexity because it's really mysterious and difficult for us to understand scientifically. Along the way, I became infected with the meme, and I wrote a book about memes. And I'm very, very interested in cultural evolution and the driving force of the evolution of memes and how they've changed us as human beings. So that's a sort of, rather a long sketch in answer to your question.
So I definitely want to get back to the memes, but first I would love to talk about your studies in consciousness, because I think it's one of the more difficult problems that we as skeptics or atheists or whatever have to tackle, because you can kind of explain to somebody how evolution works or whether or not creation is likely true, but people's own experiences are their own, and when your own experience is unreliable, your memory is unreliable, things like that, I think that's a really interesting thing to study. Is it hard to tell somebody, like, I know this is what you experienced and I know that's what you think, but you're wrong, your memory is wrong?
Yes, but that's not getting at the problem of consciousness. consciousness, we have no definition of consciousness, but as close as we get is from a philosopher in 1974, Thomas Nagel, who asked the question, what is it like to be a bat? Now, the reason he asked that question is because what he meant was, if there's something it's like to be a bat, anything it's like for the bat, from the bat's point of view, that's what we mean by consciousness. And if there's nothing it's like to be a bat, then that's what we mean by being not conscious. So these headphones here, is there something it's like to be these headphones? No, I mean, surely not. They don't have any kind of senses or ability they're not modeling the world, they're not interacting with it, they just sit there dead, I mean, not dead, unalive. But you can ask, is a baby conscious, is a rat conscious? And we can't answer. I mean, it's deeply, deeply mysterious. So I'm kind of diverting from your question, but what your question inspired me to think about is the importance of this deep mystery for skeptics. Because there's so many things that the skeptic can say, you're wrong. We know. I mean, a lot of things about evolution, for example, a lot of things about probability and chance, a lot of things about the kind of paranormal claims that I investigated. We now have the science and we can say you're wrong. But when it comes to consciousness, this is a serious mystery for science at the moment. The more we understand about the brain, you mentioned false memory and so on, we can study that. We understand, there'll be loads more to find, but we understand pretty well the perception of color, for example. Now, we know how the information gets in the brain, where it goes, which bit of V1 is well, actually V4, and MT and other areas of the visual system are processing color and what they're doing. But what about the greenness of your green shirt? I mean, that experience. Now, this is a genuine mystery. And I think it's important for skeptics not to go around saying, we know this, you're wrong, you're wrong. They should do that in certain circumstances, and they should also be able to say, and here's a genuine mystery we don't understand. If it's anything like the mystery of life itself, we will one day understand it, and we'll go, look, it's not a mystery anymore. It's all down to DNA and evolution and blah, 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 blah. Now we understand, but it used to be a real mystery. Consciousness is like that. That's the mystery of our time. At some point, we will see why we've been so deluded about this subjective experience, this what it's like to be me, that we cannot see how it relates to the brain. We're stuck in dualism. We in our language, in our cultures, we're stuck in our education, in our growing up, in being human, with this sort of feeling that my experiences are private, ineffable qualia, and then there's a physical world out there that's something completely different from. Now, that duality has to be false, but how do we understand non-duality? So this is a real mystery, and I hope that, the really bright, the really inquiring skeptics, the ones who really want to understand the world, I hope they would all say, wow, this is a really interesting mystery. And that's the mystery that I really enjoy tangling with.
Man, you just blew my whole mind.
Oh, what's that? Your mind? What is it?
I don't know, but it's blown.
Excellent. That's what I want. Now, holding up your fists and going, I don't know. Perfect.
Glad to oblige. So memes, let's talk about that. Where did your fascination with memes start?
It started because I was very ill. I think, like many people, I just worked too hard, did too much. I'd got a job, I'd got kids, I was traveling, giving lectures. I just wore myself out, and I got chronic fatigue. My legs just didn't work anymore. I was in bed for a long time. And while I was there, one of my students wrote me an essay called Memes and Consciousness. And I kind of faintly remembered these memes idea from having read The Selfish Gene, where Richard Dawkins invented the word and the idea. And I was quite inspired by this essay, and also at that time, Dan Dennett's book, Darwin's Dangerous Idea, in 1995, had just come out. And I was able, while I was ill, to read I could read for about 20 minutes, and then I'd have to lie down and gaze at the ceiling for an hour, to recover. And so very, very, very slowly, I read that book. It took me a couple of months at that rate to read. And when I'd finished it, because it's got lots about memes, I reread The Selfish Gene. And lying there, staring at the ceiling, hour after hour, unable to do anything much, The ideas the memes used my brain to propagate themselves. And when I was better, I had all these ideas, and I wrote my book, The Meme Machine, which came out in 1999. And ever since then, I suppose I'd expected that by now there would be a thriving science of memetics, and everybody would agree that this was the most brilliant way of explaining cultural evolution, but they don't, But I have gone on thinking it requires a kind of mental flip, the same way you have to make a mental flip to understand biological evolution, and you have to see the whole concept of design turned inside out. You have to make an equivalent flip to understand our minds, our brains, our culture, that it's actually driven from the bottom up by the competition between ideas to use our brains to get spread. So that's how it began, and I go on thinking it's a great idea, and most people don't.
Well, why do you think it's not gained traction the way you expected?
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult question. I've given quite a lot of lectures called Why Is There No Science of Memetics? And I don't know that any of my reasons are right, but one reason is people don't get it. Now, you probably realize that an awful lot of people don't get natural selection.
Right.
It's actually quite hard to really grasp it. I, as you can tell from my voice, I come from England, and there we have good biological evolution in schools. We don't have the scale of the problem that you have.
Yeah. It's not putting it lightly.
Pardon?
Putting it lightly, the problem.
Yes, I am. I'm very polite on the whole.
Well, it's very British of you.
And yet I would have students doing psychology degree in their final year doing my consciousness course, and I would say to them, would you just write down what natural selection means? And a lot of them, they can't do it. And it is actually very difficult. They'll have a rough idea, but they don't really get it. They don't really. I call it design by death. I mean, to really grasp natural selection, you have to grasp the vastness of the number of things that have to die for design to emerge out of all this variety. So you have to understand that if you have, and this is putting it in either Dennett or Dawkins' way, you need a three-step algorithm. You need many other people have said it too. You need variation, things are copied with all sorts of varieties. You need selection, most of them die, and only a few are copied again. And you need heredity. You need whatever it is that helped them survive to be passed on. That's basically what Darwin said. That sounds so simple, but you really need to grasp the length of time and the amount of stuff that has to be killed off or just die in order that design emerges. So that's one thing. Another thing I think is people are really scared. I mean, I know it sounds pathetic, but people are scared of the idea, which comes straight out of memetics, that memes are bits of information that use us to get themselves copied. That everything I have said, that my books, my articles, my everything, this interview, is memes, words, stories, skills, habits, copyable information, just, English got into this brain, you happen to turn up there, it does away with any kind of magical idea of free will, as does so much of science anyway, but, so all that is frightening to people. And I think finally the third reason is evolution itself has, as you well know, its enemies from different directions. So there are many biologists and scientists who want to keep Darwin, evolutionary theory, natural selection to themselves, to biology. They really think that it's a bastardization, a false idea to take Darwin's ideas and apply it in the realm of internet memes or something like that. They really don't want us to do that. And on the other side are social scientists of various kinds, not all of course, who don't want anything to do with evolution. I mean, they want their history, their geography, their humanities to be free of that. A lot don't, but some do. And so memetics is kind of squeezed between these. So those are just some of the reasons, but as I said, I don't know whether those are the real reasons or not, but it's hard going.
Sure. Interesting. Do you think the reason people struggle to understand evolution or natural selection, do you think it's because we're not good at understanding big numbers? Like we can't grasp a million years or 100 million years. Is
yes,
that?
I think that's a large part of it, just the vastness of time. Dan Dennett does a wonderful job of trying to explain that.
Yeah.
And probability. I mean, I've done a lot of studies because it relates to the paranormal and coincidences and so on how bad we are generally at understanding probability.
Yes.
So when it comes to 1 in 2 and tossing a coin, it's difficult enough. Yeah. But when it comes to millions, billions of years, we find that really hard.
Yeah, or even the thing that Carl Sagan does, I'm sure somebody did it before him with, if all of time is a 12-year calendar, then this happened in April and this happened in March, and then we're, 11:59 on New Year's Eve, and I can't, I know it's right and I know it's true, but I can't make my brain understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
no, I think that's important. But I think another thing that's important is that when we look at all the things around us, like in front of me is a pen and some paper and some headphones and, carpet and table and these other things, we think they've been intelligently designed. Mm-hmm. We think that somehow in our head is this sort of conscious, I mean, not everybody, but there's a sort of conscious me, and I have these brilliant ideas, and I designed, if I I paint a lot, I love painting. If I, paint a picture and I'm pleased with it, I think, I painted that picture, And so it's very hard for us to make the flip when thinking about biological design into thinking that it was driven from the bottom up by little bits of information stored on a molecule of DNA competing with each other, that they produce this stuff. And so it's very easy to keep on applying our ideas of intelligent design, i.e., what we think happens in the brain, to that. Now, the flip we have to make is so big, I think, it is, and applies in both biology and in culture or memes, that human design actually is only intelligent because of the memes. And this is a really hard thing for people to think. I would say that an elephant or a tree is designed. It's designed by natural selection. Now, Richard Dawkins doesn't say that. He puts design in inverted commas there. I don't have the inverted commas. That's all the design there is in the universe as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
When I do a painting, that is not my conscious design. It's not me intelligently designing it. It is the competition between all the memes. I've learned to use a paintbrush. I've learned whether red lake or alizarin crimson is better for what I want to paint on there. I've learned how to mix the oil paint with the whatever it is. These are all memes acquired by this brain, and this is controlled by all that stuff. This freaks people out. I don't know why. I'm happy to be here as an organism that got here for no reason at all, doesn't have free will, and is just processing memes and throwing them out. It's wonderful and amazing, and but people find that really hard.
I don't think people like to think that they're not under control of their own destiny or
yes. Then comes the big question. Who's in control of their own destiny? And it comes right back to a question which I think is fundamentally important, which is, who am I? Mm-hmm. Now, I've been training in Zen for 30 years, more than 30 years. I've meditated every day for that long. I'm not a Buddhist. I haven't signed up to believing stuff because it's in a book or any of that, but the practice is fantastic. And a lot of that practice, apart from just calming the mind, which in my case takes some doing because there's so much going on, it's a lot about asking, who am I? And learning to discard or drop, or perhaps not discard, that implies pushing away more, learning to drop the clinging to the self. Building up the self is very important. Giving it powers and control. It's a lot about letting go of control. Acting, doing things that have consequences, admitting and accepting those consequences, or even taking responsibility for them, while knowing that this is just simply stuff playing out. I mean, this is one of the amazing things that the Buddha saw. It's called codependent arising. Everything that happens because of what happened before. I mean, that was a pretty stunning thing to say 2,500 years ago. He wasn't saying, there's a God who made it. He was saying, everything that happens because of what went before. It's almost like laws of thermodynamics in a very simple form, And that's all relates to the self. The self is just a name we give to something that isn't really what we think it is. It's an illusion in that sense. There's not a little me inside pulling the strings. being the subject of experience, being the initiator of the actions, there is an idea of a self, a story about a self, and there's a body acting in the world because of everything that went before. That's the light in which I want to think about control. When you said, I'm in charge of, well, who? If the self is an ever-changing, ephemeral kind of a story produced by the ongoing processes in a brain, it's not in charge of everything. And wanting to control things is a big problem in our life. And my mum was a control freak, and so I'm probably a little bit obsessed with that idea. But, we don't have, in my opinion, an inner conscious self with the power to control its body. The body is an integrated system, a part of an interconnected world, doing what it does because of all those interconnections. Interesting.
I think the meditation thing is really, so you said you meditate every day?
Mm-hmm.
How does, I've tried to do it. I do yoga and they're always clear your mind. I can't do it. Like, is it something that you practice until you?
Yes, the word practice is absolutely it. It's all practicing. It is practicing sitting still and just being there.
That sounds awful.
It is, but it gets better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have a problem in the sort of society's view of meditation that, it's so relaxing. And, some kinds of meditation are guided meditations, imagining the ocean and stuff like that. But serious meditation for a different purpose, for real transformation, is very hard. It's very tough. Because in the beginning, well, always really, but in the beginning it's harder because you have to sit there, learn skills, there are lots of different ways of doing it, to calm the mind and watch. And what you see is ghastly stuff. I mean, when I first went on my first retreat ever at a remote farmhouse in the mountains of Wales, I found it horrific, really. It was a difficult time in my life anyway, but I would sit there hour after hour, because the way the retreats work, you sit half an hour's meditation, you do 10 minutes slow walking or exercise or something, another half hour sitting, another 10 minutes walking around the room, another half hour sitting, then you might go off and do some job or something, you come back and do another half hour, and you get up at 4:30 in the morning, and it goes on till 10 at night, and I can tell you, you have to face up to yourself.
Yeah.
I remember my husband always goes on about this because he went on a retreat, and my teacher then, John Crook, used to say, well, it's only you and the wall isn't doing it. And, I would be looking at this wall, and there would be scenes of torture and murder. There would be guilt for terrible things I've done. There would be hatred of my mother for trying to make me do this, that, and the other. There would be anger with my husband for being unkind. Or, endless drivel, ghastliness. But facing up to that stuff, learning to be there with it, it loses its power.
That's great. Because that's what I get if I try to meditate or do whatever. The first thing, it's immediately stuff I did that's embarrassing. Something I said on this show that was stupid. And I hate it.
Of course you do. Okay. Right. You're in the first step then.
But it's the worst step.
It's horrible. Why did I persevere? And that's probably the question that you're asking. Why keep doing it? If it's so horrible.
Read my mind.
Why did I persevere? I don't know. Probably because life was so painful. And then now I persevere. Often I don't know why I persevere, I just do. I made a commitment with myself that I would sit every day, and I do. But I would say the effect is coming to terms with yourself. And selves are hard stuff, the stuff that these brains throw up, the guilt, the embarrassment, the shame, the anger, the fury, the hatred, all this human stuff. Now, I think it's a lot better to live one's life able to see that and sit with it than it is every time it comes up, go away. The skill, part of the skill of meditation is this awfully tricky balancing act. Some people liken it to surfing a wave or something. You can fall back, you can fall forward. It's a balancing act. The way to deal with these things is neither to hang on to them, not to push them away. So our teaching is some very common statement. When you sit in meditation, let it come in. Let the stuff. Don't block it. Don't go.
Like you acknowledge it and dismiss it.
And let it be. So whatever it is, it's what it is, and let it go. Not push it away. No. Just let it go. When you are able, eventually, after years and years and years of meditation, to let anything come, be, and go, then that's a peaceful mind. It's not an empty mind necessarily. I mean, to some extent, one can meditate with a lot of practice and have no thoughts. But that isn't really the point. That's a skill. But more the point is to be able, whatever thought comes, whatever impression comes, whatever terrible things happen, is to allow them to be what they are and let them go when they go. Now, does that sound to you to be something worthwhile, or does it just sound a bit bonkers?
No, it sounds like I need to do that, because I have the worst problem that I'll just be sitting and doing nothing, and there's a thing on I saw on Facebook, and it's a guy, it's a meme, an internet meme of a guy lying in bed with his eyes wide awake, and that thing I said 7 years was so stupid, and I get that all the time, and it's torturous. I don't want to be dramatic about it, but it's awful, and I hate it. And I think being able to deal with things like that would be incredibly helpful.
Well, then, I think what might be helpful to you is to know that it is hard. And if you want to meditate and you sit down and it's hard, accept, okay, it's hard.
Yeah.
But I've had so many things happen that have been kind of turning points. And I met Baba Ram Das. I don't know if you know who he is. In the 1970s, he wrote a book, Be Here Now. Great, he was a psychologist who went off to India and blah. But I met him once, and I told him I'd been practicing mindfulness, which wasn't all trendy then. I mean, serious mindfulness, moment to moment, being here.
Yes.
And it's so hard. And I said to him, but it's so hard. And he looked at me with a beautiful look, and he said, it's even harder than you think. And that was such a freeing...
Yeah.
To know that it wasn't just me being bad at it or something, that it really, really helped me a lot.
We're all struggling with it. That we're all kind of struggling with the same things.
Yes, and that if I went on, it might get even harder. It was sort of scary, but drew me on. When I talk about this, I might sound as though I really know more than I do. I can tell you some of these stuff that I've been through and come through, but I can tell you there's a whole lot more. I have been on retreats with an American Zen teacher called Reb Anderson, and one of the many things he teaches is welcome all beings. What he means by that is welcome every perception, every thought, every idea, everything that happens, you welcome it. The first time he said that, I was like, what? But what about all the horrible things?
Yeah.
But gradually, that's what I tried to do. And last night, I went to bed, there was awful noise going on, this music outside, and I was like, oh, shut up! And how could I welcome that? How could I? But, I think with practice, and actually, if you can welcome anything, then you're not afraid. That's hard. I'm trying to admit that it goes on being hard, and yet it seems to me to be worthwhile to do this. And to come back to your question of some time ago about who's in control and so on, all this reflects on the nature of self, on who am I, what's going on here, what's it all about. Basically, the deepest, most fundamental questions about how we live.
Yeah, I've been personally trying to be better about acknowledging the moment, acknowledging when I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. We have to work, and we have to clean, and we have to cook, and we have to do all this crap that is necessary but not fun. And I try to be okay, I'm here at this conference, I'm doing a podcast that I'm passionate about, to grab onto those moments and be things are good right now, acknowledge that. I'm terrible at it, but it's...
No, well, that's it. They're not easy, these things. That's why the word you used was so important.
Which one?
Practice.
Yes. I had another question that I completely forgot. So We're coming up on a half hour. Where can people find your books, your work?
Well, I have a website. If you put Susan Blackmore into Google, you'll find it straight away. But it's, I think it's susanblackmore.uk. Okay. I am not on Twitter. I am not on Facebook. I
was just trying to find you on Twitter so I could tell you we were going to be late, and I couldn't find you.
No, well, this is something I do battle with a little bit, but I had January, I gave up email completely.
Really?
And it was a revelation. I realized I haven't written a serious book for many years, and I gave up email because I just had become so overwhelmed with every morning waking up with this awful kind of pressure of all the stuff I've got to do, and going to bed at night not having finished it with the inbox full of stuff and feeling what is life if it's like. So I just decided to have a month off. I mean, I do have an assistant, only part-time, and but she fielded things in case there was anything really urgent, and otherwise I just let it all go, and I began to write another book. And I remembered why I enjoyed my work. I remembered what I want to do. I want to read scientific papers, understand stuff, put them together, see if I can. I'm actually writing about out-of-the-body experiences. I'm going right back to what started me off in the first place. And I'm sitting there at my desk going, oh, yes, this is what I want to be doing. So I think if I joined Facebook or Twitter or any of these other things, they would just be another burden. And so for the moment, I don't. And I don't have a card to give people, and if people ask me, I go, no, sorry.
Really?
Yeah.
It's so interesting. And I feel like I'm having that moment right now because, doing what I'm doing at this convention, I'm trying to pack in 8 interviews in one day and think of questions and research people who I don't necessarily know a whole lot about and don't want to look like an idiot in front of. But, I'm so happy right now. I love hearing what you have to say, and I remember why I'm enjoying doing this, and I'm lucky.
Good.
I feel very good. I'm going to go take on the world after this.
Excellent. Well, It's fun for me too.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, and
Not at all.
I very much do appreciate it.
I shall get back to these wicked atheists now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com. This episode was taped at Cinnamon Sound Studios in Aurora, Illinois, and the music was written and performed by Brad Chagdis. If you like what you're hearing, please consider making a contribution at patreon.com/Hemant, that's He-Man T. We appreciate your support. I'm Hemant Mehta.
And I'm Jessica Blumke. We hope you'll join us next time.